Hi, Michael.
Hello, Peter.
We're finally getting going.
Yes, sir.
That was the weirdest start ever.
Yes.
We should probably explain to people what happened, that when we were doing the test recording, when every time we would play it back, some phantom music was appearing.
Yeah. Very odd.
Very odd. Thank you for doing this.
My pleasure.
Wanted to talk to you for a long time. I'm going to set the scene so you understand where I'm coming at this from, and then you can help me through my journey of understanding anarchism a bit more. So I would say 4 years ago, pre-Bitcoin for me, I was just living in a small town in England. I just believed there was a state. I believed we picked a party every 4 years, and that's just the way it was. I had Stockholm syndrome. That's how it was. I discovered Bitcoin. I start making a podcast, and I start coming across a lot of Bitcoiners who are anarchists and libertarians who are yelling at me, calling me a status cuck.
Were they wrong?
I think what's happening over time is I'm gradually shedding everything I knew from the past. More recently, even with mainstream media. And so I'm very much in a lost place. If I'm honest, I'm like, I don't know what to believe anymore, but I've also struggled with the idea of where we should be or where we should go. So like, I want to start with you, because for me, my view on anarchism was, it's guys in masks at a G8 conference smashing up McDonald's. Yeah. That's all I knew about anarchism until I started speaking to some of the more smarter people. So how do you explain anarchism to people?
Well, it's going to be different for the British because you had the Sex Pistols song.
Yeah.
So I don't want to destroy passersby. Anarchism can be summed up in one sentence. You do not speak for me. And everything else is just application of that concept. It is the idea that authority is inherently illegitimate. It's different if you have a lawyer or a doctor, you're deferring to their authority. It's something you've chosen. But the claim that because a lot of my neighbors think something is good or desirable has no bearing on truth. And the claim that morally they're in a position to impose their view of what's good and desirable upon me is something so nonsensical we wouldn't even consider as a hypothesis unless we were trained to believe this since children in government schools. One little thing that I'm going to predict you're going to start changing, maybe even by the end of this talk, is to stop referring to them as the mainstream media, because their views are not mainstream at all. They have a corporate agenda, which is increasingly transparent to everyone. Nothing wrong with having an agenda, but to claim that they represent the mainstream as opposed to form the mainstream, I think is a bit of a slight error in description.
Okay, that's fair. So what do you refer to them as?
The corporate press,
just the corporate
which is
press.
the enemy of the people.
Enemy of the people, propaganda.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agitprop, more specifically.
Well, as a Bitcoiner, I've become increasingly aware of it because of the misreporting of Bitcoin continually, whether it's the New York Times, whether it's the Guardian.
And these aren't stupid. This is something conservatives get very wrong. These aren't stupid people. You can't work for the New York Times and be dumb. You can't work for the Guardian and be dumb. These people are very educated. Education correlates with intelligence. And if I was a journalist and I'm covering something, it's going to be inevitable I'm going to get things wrong at some point, right?
Mm-hmm.
However, once that mistake has pointed out to me, if I had any semblance of commitment to the truth or to decency, I would not only feel humiliated, I would also make it a point to not make that mistake again. Even in interpersonal relationships, if I misjudge someone because of a lack of knowledge, someone's like, oh, he acted this way, not because of you, because, something happened to his wife. You feel like a jerk and you're like, oh my God, I got to make amends. And, but there's none of that when it comes to corporate media. Bitcoin is a perfect example of this. I'm sure we're days away, if they haven't already. You're more familiar with the space than I am, but Bitcoin being white supremacist, I'm sure is just a headline waiting to be written, which is nonsensical, of course, if anyone knows it's a form of currency and many other things. But this is how they operate. And once you see their machinations, you can't not see them. And that's the red pill.
Yeah, that's the thing. I feel like at the moment, I've taken the red pill and it's slowly kind of working its way through my body. Yeah. But I've really struggled to shed some of these, beliefs or things that I just held that were true. For a long time, the BBC for me was an institution of something I could trust. John Simpson for me was a journalist who I believed in. I saw him travel the world, interview some of the most important people. And then I've traveled here to the US, and I've seen how people view the BBC, and I've seen a different lens on their reporting, and now I just don't trust anything.
Good. The BBC is very mixed. Obviously, it's a state organization, so you're going to have trouble there. However, they're very good, some of the reporters, at being asking the tough questions of people on all sides. So you have to give them credit for their 3-part documentary on Thatcher, the Downing Street years, is the best resource on her, I think, out there, which is amazing given the notoriously hostile relationship the two of them had. So and a lot of their nature stuff is second to none. So the BBC, you could say very high things about, but at the same time, their agenda is very hard left. It's very portrayed in a certain thing, and that's fine. But first of all, I think it's obscene to use taxpayer monies to fund a news organization. But it's just also interesting that an agency that has state backing is going to be more respectable in many cases than corporate agencies here in the States, like the New York Times and Washington Post. I think the BBC gets it right, or gets it more reasonable in terms of displaying all sides of the issue than you'd see here across the pond.
Well, I think that's because it is funded by the TV license in the UK. It is a state tax for it. It has a certain amount of pressure on it to be as impartial as possible, which I think you've recognized. I also, did you see the 4-part documentary they made about the Iraq War?
I've not.
That is fantastic. That's probably the best reporting on that. But yeah, so I'm in this place where I'm like shedding these skins, and for some people I haven't gotten far enough. I'm regularly still called a statist, and I think what it is
well, that's not going to, I'm sorry to interrupt you, that's not going to change.
No,
because
it's not.
I'm not a real anarchist because I don't talk about Bitcoin enough. So
we'll get there.
Yeah, whatever anyone has some perspective, there's a slur that they'll use to people that don't follow in line completely. So I think statist we got a ways to go before statist in this case.
Yeah, and I think what it is the reason I want to talk to you is I can't see the end goal. I can't see, I see the state, I see the issues with the state. I've heard you talk about it quite a bit, and I've talked to other people, but I can't see the end goal. I can't see the alternative. I can't see how it actually works. And
this is the alternative right here.
Well, it's the conversation,
right? This is we're here. We are in an anarchist relationship with one another. Neither has an authority. You have some semblance of authority because this is your show, but we met peaceably. Anarchism is a relationship. It's not a location. So anytime you have people exchanging peacefully, that is an anarchist situation, despite the state's claim that but for the state, this would be impossible, which is like claiming if there wasn't for all these exorcists, we'd all be possessed. It's dubious at best.
But this is manageable, and as neighbors, or maybe even a street, it's manageable. What I struggle with is the idea of how does this work at scale with 360 million people? Right. How does that work? And we'll come to that. And
sure.
Some of the questions I already knew I had. I started reading the intro to your book, and you almost play those responses back at us. You know the questions you've been asked 1,000 times, and I'm gonna ask them. So sorry about
gladly.
that.
No, please.
So, but let's start with the state. And I want to ask you firstly, what do you think the state does well?
The state does well in terms of fomenting emotion among the population. The state does well in terms. That's one thing. I mean, you're asking an anarchist to think of things the state does well. The state isn't even good at waging war. I mean, if it would be very easy to make the argument for government if it was good at war, right? If the Iraq War was we're in and out in a week, Saddam's gone, minimal or no civilian casualties, we could pat ourselves on the back. You can make that argument. That has not happened.
Mm-hmm.
So. Even things that are regarded as the state at its most valorous, like World War II, that's a very good versus evil situation, although we kind of sweep Stalin under the rug because we don't know how to fit him into the good versus evil situation. Even there, the amount of death and destruction is just unconscionable.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't just mean the Holocaust. I mean civilians and soldiers being killed from every direction. So I can't think of anything the state does well. Because it's just like let's even take this out of the realm of politics.
Mm-hmm.
What is it that gigantic bureaucracies do well? Well, they're good at organizing. They're good at making someone have a job for their life and taking care of their own kind of constituents or employees, whatever you might have. But I think when people stop thinking of the state as something that's representational and start thinking of it as a giant violent bureaucracy, and ask yourselves, what are things that giant bureaucracies do well, they're going to also struggle to have the same answers, or the answer they come up with will be the same answers that I come up with.
Managing borders and tax collection.
But they don't manage borders well. Tax evasion is and avoidance are both the status quo. So I don't think if they collected taxes well, we would really have black markets.
Yeah, I mean, what I don't understand with anarchism, and tell me, I don't know if it's for you, if it's an end goal, an idea, an objective you want to reach, or is it a personal philosophical way of living?
Well, I think it's both, which I hate when people answer the question that way.
Yeah,
and
I know. But
whenever you have a worldview, it's kind of living the values. So for me, anarchism is engaging with people peaceably. It is enforcing strictly your borders and your boundaries. It is feeling outrage when innocent people are harmed, especially en masse, which is what the state is very good at: mass carnage and mass destruction. And it is, I mean, you're saying it as an end goal, but I think what people often don't understand is anarchism is the norm. Lord of the Flies is not reality. Lord of the Flies is not what would happen. We watch, if you watch the show Survivor, I know there's the British version as well. The point is, the only reason these people are antagonistic is because they're being forced to vote off each other. Where in reality, if they were on a desert island together, extremely diverse casts, sure, people would dislike each other, so on and so forth, but the Hobbesian idea would not hold true. They would actually work together pretty well, because when you're talking about survival or on lifeboats, you're not, getting all violent. And even in situations like in the Andes, where there was a plane crash, people are very hesitant even to eat dead people. I mean, that's how much people, being social animals, do like and respect each other. Now, the big question for anarchism and for any society, okay, what do you do about the murderers? What do you do about the rapists? And part of this has to come with the recognition that the number of people who are murderers and rapists are very, very low. And it's not that they're low because of the law. It's low because A, I'm going to put a target in my back, and B, most people do not think in these terms. I would bet that 99% of these people who are listening to the show, over 99, if they had the opportunity to rape someone and get away with it, it would be unconscionable to them, and the guilt would follow them for the rest of their lives. So again, but the valid question is, all right, well, what do you do about that guy who thinks differently?
So what do you do about that guy?
Well, there's very different mechanisms. Unfortunately, there's no system that is going to be utopian. So there's criticism of anarchism, like, all right, sometimes the guy's going to get away with it. That is the status quo. What's his name? Jimmy Savile?
Jimmy Savile, yeah.
Yeah. He was raping children
for decades.
He was joking about it. Everyone's like, oh, Jimmy, ha, ha, ha. There's infinite example of people who are just monsters, and they never suffer consequences. Jack the Ripper is another example. And there's just also on a minor level, just people who just commit crimes. So under anarchism, you would have much more clearly defined property rights, and you would have things like reputation, and people much more involved in their neighborhoods. But again, this is going to be a tricky situation under any circumstances.
What would the base rule of law be, though? And
There's no law.
There's no law at all.
Right. There's rules, but there's no law.
Okay.
Right.
So there's just rules. What are the base rules? Is this just based on property rights?
There's no base. That's the whole thing. Anarchism means freedom. So, for example, if I want to have a store, and if you want to come in the store, you have to wear this certain outfit, and we could have that now. That's certainly a prerogative. There's certain venues you go into where you have to dress a certain way. There's a dress code. If you want to go to the Harvard Club, you have to have a blazer and a tie on, for example. So basically what you would have is everything would be under someone's jurisdiction, and they would set those principles. Now, some places would be velvet rope. Like, you can't come in here unless X, Y, and Z, I think you would say. Other places, it's, the supermarket, come one, come all, or no shirt, no shoes, no service. So what anarchism does is allows the maximum freedom for every individual.
So, for example, here in New York, I'm a smoker, but I'm a vape smoker.
Okay.
I had to go to the little shop and he kept under the counter the flavored ones because there's a rule here now that they've created that you can't have flavored vapes, which surprised me when I got here. I didn't even realize this was a new thing in New York.
Yeah, it's demented.
Yeah, so the creep of the state is obviously a huge.
But let me ask you this, as a former statist cuck.
Yeah.
Do you regard that law as legitimate?
Of course not.
Well, it's not. I'm a grown up. It's not, of course, because there's many people who'd say, look, maybe this is a law, it's misguided, but it's certainly we should still respect it. And once you realize why, then basically everything else follows.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I'm an adult.
Right.
I would like to smoke. I'm not smoking in people's face, and I would like a flavor.
And here's the other thing. It might even be true. In fact, I would have no problem, for the sake of argument, saying it is true that these kinds of things are attractive to teenagers, and that it's very, very dangerous when teenagers start smoking because they're trapped, and we have to be concerned about that. Sure, gladly. I don't care. Peter's an adult. Peter wants his flavored thing. If Peter's not going to give it to children, the end. There's nothing else to discuss.
And I'm responsible for my own children's decisions as well and guiding them and making sure they make those decisions.
Exactly.
Which becomes to a bigger issue is that recently where I've started to feel challenged is what's been happening with my children and what are my children being taught. It's actually kind of scary.
It's child abuse, yes.
Well, it's to the point of really considering what I want my children to do. So we had this, my son phoned me up. It was mad. There's been 2 incidences he had. So he's a drama and arts student.
How old is he?
He's 17 now.
Okay.
And he wanted to do this monologue. And it was a monologue from a play back, I think it's a US play back in the 50s or 40s. I can't remember the actual era. But it was about the racial conflict of the time. And it was somebody from a factory, and that person in the factory was talking about the different workers. And so there's certain racial connotations.
Sure.
Yeah. But it was a piece of art. This is a historical piece. So the teacher turned around to him and said, we would rather you didn't do this piece because there's going to be some black people in the audience and we don't want to offend them. So he came home to me frustrated and he's like, Dad, I wanted to do this. I was like, just do it or just refuse to do work. He didn't want the confrontation. He didn't do it. But
can I interrupt you? Notice that this teacher is speaking on behalf of the black people as opposed to black people who have minds of their own, who are perfectly capable of understanding something in a historical context and who actually have to deal with racism on a day-to-day basis. Yeah. But she feels the need to interject herself into this relationship.
So, that was the first incident. And the second one, which is definitely going to make you laugh, and I just found it a bit strange. So they have this thing called PSHE. I think that's what it is. My son would correct me. It's sex education, which firstly, I don't really want the school teaching, but whatever. If it's responsible, it's fine. But they now have the 2 pictures of the anatomy of the male and the female, but they can't refer to them as male and female. They have to refer as person with a penis and person with a vagina because they don't want to offend people who don't identify as their gender.
I don't find that funny at all.
Well, funny as in stupid funny.
It's not stupid. It's very smart. It's a very smart mechanism to control children because when you start controlling someone's language and how they express themselves, right away they're using in-group jargon and you can identify within seconds if this person is being submissive and subordinate to the master class narrative or if they're thinking for themselves. So it's a very sophisticated technique that they're using.
But this is, Michael, the stuff that's freaking me out now.
Well, good.
Yeah.
You should be freaked out. These people are horrible. And you should be, I don't think it's funny in the slightest. I think this is a cause for rage.
Yeah, I mean, when I say funny, that's maybe a figure of speech we use in the UK. When we say it's
funny. No, you say taking the piss. That's the figure of speech.
But also when we say it's funny, it's not like we're saying it's funny that you should laugh at it. It's funny is just like a figure of speech. It's not that it's a comical thing. Well, I mean, it's sarcastically comically, but we don't have to dwell on that. The point being is like, it's just another thing that's making me think, what the fuck? What is going on here? Like, but I'm also like, what do I do? But
here's something. Have you not picked up that they used to do this to us, but we didn't realize it because we were kids? That's the thing that you haven't clicked yet.
It feels very different now.
Because you're an adult and you can see it for what it is. When you're a kid, fish don't know. There's that whole a metaphor about 2 fish in a river, and one goes, the water's really warm today, and the other one goes, what's water? We're oblivious to our environment if that's the entirety of our context. So when we're kids and we're in this school and this is how knowledge is being promulgated to us, we do not have that independence to perceive it as anything other than, truth that Moses received on Mount Sinai. And that's why it's so depraved that they're doing this to children who do not have the capacity or the power to actually do anything about it.
Well, I think
So I'm just sorry.
yeah.
This is why, like, I find it, why I say rage. But these people are just really despicable human beings.
But we also, as humans, as adults, are accepting this because...
Don't say we.
Okay. Other adults are just accepting of this.
Of
So in the
course.
situation, I'm outraged. I'm concerned. I'm like, what do I do? Can I remove my kids? I don't think my ex-wife sees it in the same way, but she'll have the conversation. But I'm aware that plenty of other parents are aware their children being taught these things, but aren't outraged. So, I mean, we're quite subordinate in the UK anyway, but there's this kind of like general acceptance of this is the way it is.
Oh, yeah, that's in the States as well, yeah.
But people like you and I are made to feel like, well, certainly maybe more you, I'm on a slower journey, but made sometimes feel like the weirdos, the outcasts.
Well, good. That weirdos are the ones who move any country.
Yeah.
It's always going to be the fringe who is, in my last book, The New Right, I had the line about on the fringes where insanity and innovation lay. Because when you're in the middle and someone's saying things never heard before, you have no real way of determining, because there's so many standard deviations away from the mean, whether this is a crazy person or this is a great genius of our time. So you don't really know. It just sounds unprecedented to you. But yeah, Mencken, H.L. Mencken, who I quote frequently, he was a great cynic of the early 20th century, newspaperman. He had the quote about the average man does not want to be free. He simply wants to be safe. And I think people who are interested in independence and who view life as a wonderful, magical adventure regard people like this as quite literally soulless.
But what if people do want to live like this? How do we coordinate them?
The beauty of anarchism is they can do whatever the heck they want, and we are free to thrive, whereas they are free to just have as much consequence on the earth as a butterfly.
But you're not essentially free now. There are limitations to what you can do. You might be free in your mind.
No, I'm not free. There's many ways I'm unfree. One of the reasons I'm moving from New York is I can't get a gun here. Now, this is very different connotations in the UK, but here, we have the Second Amendment, which I'm not particularly for or against. I'm not for the Constitution, but I am increasingly getting like some cool books from my house, right? I don't want to worry about being robbed if I put them on Instagram. Whereas if I go to Texas, I'll at least have some measure of security.
Well, again, that's another interesting point, because I get asked that a lot, being from the UK, and it's like, and I've been thinking, I mentioned to you of moving to Austin as well, and that idea, I'm would consider that idea of getting a gun. It'd be a huge step for me, because in the UK we don't have guns. I kind of like that. That's the point, And I know I interviewed a British libertarian. It's like, no, we should be changing the laws here. Everyone should be able to own a gun. Someone runs into your house, a criminal with a gun, you have nothing to protect yourself. And I agree with his point, but we've established a society where gun crime is very limited.
We haven't.
You haven't, but
the British government has.
Yeah, and I sometimes think that's maybe one good thing. We don't have guns are not ubiquitous. And I kind of like that.
Well, this is one of the ways that anarchism is promoted is not by persuasion, but by putting steps in place to make people imposing their values technically impossible. Bitcoin is a good example of this.
Yeah, great.
But 3D printing of guns, Cody Wilson, Defense Distributed. Now, there's two scenarios. One is, I can sit here and argue why guns are a good thing and more people should have them, or have at least the option. You might argue, look, slippery slope. You have a situation where everyone's armed. You're going to have innocent people being harmed. It's inevitable. This is not tenable. Let's figure something out. And then you have 3D printing of guns and you have gun proliferation. You're SOL. There's nothing you could do at this point. So the best argument for gun laws isn't gun freedoms, it's gun proliferation. Because once there's enough of them out there, the conversation becomes moot. So that's where my money is.
That's the point. Whereas if I was moving to Austin, it's certainly something I consider. I'd like to think I could live without it, but I kind of feel like it's one of those things I would have to consider.
You'd be happy having, and I'm not a gun owner.
Yeah.
You'd be happy having it in a safe, under your bed, under lock, so your kids can't get to it, just in case.
All right. Let's talk about the move to Austin and what's happened here. I've been to New York 25 times. This first time I've been back in 18 months. It wasn't as bad as I expected. I took my mask off at JFK and I haven't put it back on since. And a couple of strange looks, but no one's asked me to put a mask on. I've been to Starbucks, I've been shopping. But I have seen a lot of boarded up shops and bars. The Irish bars, every Irish bar I've seen is boarded up, which is disappointing for me.
So there's upsides, I guess.
Well, dude, I'm half Irish. I miss
Someone will hear you.
Yeah, it's okay. I always look for the local Irish bar. But I haven't lived through what's happened here. But a lot of people I know, they're leaving. They're going to Miami. They're going to Austin. What did I miss?
I've been here all my life. I moved here when I was 2.
Yeah.
What they've done to this city, I will never forgive them. It's as if they took my kid and are beating him in front of me. There's so many. You're coming here as a tourist, right?
Yeah.
There's so many cool little restaurants and stores and boutiques and ice cream shops and bookstores, and they're all gone. I like to travel. It's something I enjoy. And when you get to a certain point, having the kind of job we do, it's really great that we have that liberty to travel and see the world. And actually, you come here, now you're doing work, so it's win-win. One of the things I do is it's hard to explore a new city because you don't want to do the touristy stuff. You're going to miss the cool things. What my trick is, I always go to the weird ice cream store in whatever town because that's going to be in the cool neighborhood, and you get to try someone be an independent creative artisan. The best one happens to be in New York. Ice and Vice. It was on the Lower East Side. It's gone. So all these we have seen a sustained attack on what is considered to be the backbone of any thriving economy, the small independent businessman, the creator, the guy who put up his shingle and is doing something different. They were the first ones to be destroyed by these lockdowns. Amazon, Target, all the Walmart, all the giant conglomerates, they're doing fine. It's the little guy who did not have the capital in the bank to last for a year. The quintessential American story is someone comes from overseas, they open a fruit stand or a laundromat, and the kids work there as well, but now their children are having a far better future than the one they would have had back in the motherland. Those have been all destroyed. And there's no hand-wringing. There's no oh my gosh, we had to do this, but look at what cost. This is terrible. So these people, it's going to continue until these politicians start having to face personal consequences for what they've done. And it's very, very hard for me as someone who is a passionate New Yorker, who loves this city, who I was the guy when people were like, oh, it's so dirty, it's so hard here, the apartments are small, oh, you don't get it, you're just weak. And it's I'm out. I can't do it anymore. I can't defend what has been done to this city. The priorities are completely misguided. So there's no mechanism by which things are going to get better, at least for the next 4 years. So I'm out of here. I'm looking for real estate in Austin right now. Thankfully, the book's doing well.
Oh, good. We will talk about that.
Yeah.
But what do you think they should have done? Or what did they get so wrong? Because look, every state had a response. Even the red states had a response to begin with.
Sure. I think all the responses were overblown.
Okay.
I think it would be much better as the guy who emailed Fauci, I forget the guy's name, who just recently was released, where if the focus was on the people who are the high-risk targets, which was the elderly and the morbidly obese, and people who have lung issues as a whole. I think they basically have just given up on, because the will isn't there anymore. I think the level of brutality we have seen, especially I think is in Belgium and in Canada, towards peaceful populations is unconscionable and is showing the nature of the state for what it is. I don't think there is a good answer.
No.
Bluntly. People are like, oh, under anarchism, what happens? There's no good answer. If there's a pandemic, there's no country you could point to, some did better than others for sure, and we could follow their lead. But no one was like, all right, we emerged unscathed. So if you look at the charts in different states, the ones that had the mask mandates and the ones who didn't, they're remarkably similar. So I think in a year or two, when we look back, people are going to realize they really overreacted, but they also overreacted because that's where all the incentives were. Because if someone if I'm a politician and people are dying, the blame's on me. But if I close down all these stores, it's well, what else am I going to do? Otherwise, there would be death. And Governor Cuomo had said the same thing effectively during a press conference for all this. So,
failing businesses are easier to digest than deaths.
Correct.
Yeah,
correct.
But you look at who has done well. For example, Australia would be considered has done fairly well. My engineers are based out in Australia. He can't leave the country.
They couldn't walk their dogs.
Well, that as well. And they would shut down a couple of cases, they'll shut down the whole city for 3 days. But he literally cannot leave the country because we had the conference in Miami. And I was like, come on, you got to come out. Just he's not allowed to leave the country.
Yeah, for 2 years now, my buddy Chris Williamson, who's a British podcaster, we were going to go to Russia, which I'd left when I was a kid, and film it. And, that hasn't happened. So it's going to be, looks like next year. So it's very unfortunate.
But I do still, this is where you're going to see I've still got some of my old kind of ways in me. I did spend time talking to doctors, people working on the front line. I've got a friend who's a doctor in London. He was on the front line when it first exploded. Now, there was a serious high number of people coming in getting sick. And to begin with, it first happened, I understood the urgent response. I understood why our government and other governments made strong decisions to lock people down. And in some ways, I did agree with it to begin with. But now more recently that I've come to the understanding that they understand how to treat people better, how to treat people better in hospital, that it no longer makes any more sense. But I kind of understood it at the start. But for you...
But if it worked, the prime minister wouldn't have been in the hospital.
Well, you see, that was at the very start when he was walking around hospital shaking people's hands. What are you doing?
Sure. But I mean, the point being, at a certain... If everything worked, then you wouldn't be seeing that as a consequence.
Well, I think the point I'm trying to get to is that if you follow the stats to lockdowns, they kind of work. For me, it's like, but is that the right moral choice? So in an anarchist society, it feels to me like there's just an acceptance that this is going to be a wave that comes through the population, and we just accept it.
No, not necessarily. An anarchist
will coordinate in a certain way.
In an anarchist society, it would be very easy for every store to say you can't go in here without a mask.
Yeah, and
every store would have their own choices. It could be no elderly people allowed in the store, no obese people allowed in the store, or if I have a grandma at home, I'm gonna only have no contact delivery. I mean, every place would have its own mechanism. Now, as a consequence of this, it might not be ideal in terms of the spread. But again, we're dealing with a disease that has a 99% survival rate. Yeah. There's no mechanism where some people aren't going to be dying. And I really question the premise that these lockdowns, which were done haphazardly and all over the place, when you're dealing with something that's global, it's kind of like a dam, right? The water is going to find that hole. So when you're dealing with some kind of a worldwide thing where we have train flights and people are crossing borders all the time, there does not seem to have been any kind of ideal situation.
Well, I think
especially these masks, because the arguments like if you don't wear the mask, you want to kill grandma. We're not wearing the masks that are effective against the virus. Number one. And number two is it's like a condom with two holes in it. This is a virus, and it's not skin tight. It's just, and the question is like, well, something is better than nothing, but that's something. It has a cost.
Well, the funny thing on the masks that got me to the point where I was like, this is just ridiculous. Is flying out. I flew to Germany, from Germany to Costa Rica, and et cetera, et cetera. My flight to Costa Rica, I'm sat here. There's a lady sat next to me. And my mask has just slipped down my nose, as it always does. And they're like, you need to pull that up over your nose. I was like, fine. And what happened was my flight to Germany, there was no service in the air. I would just sit down for the whole flight. They had a food and drink service. So I was allowed to take my mask off to eat and drink on the plane. So what I did is kept a glass of wine there the whole time. My friend did that, yeah. And just slowly sipped it. I was like, this is pointless.
But even
this is pointless. It doesn't make any sense.
Even if that wasn't the case, if you have a mask and there's gaping holes and you're sitting next to someone, you're getting their diseases.
Yeah.
There's no other situation.
Yeah.
By the way, if you go to minimally-compliant-masks.com, which I went to, it's just cheesecloth. So it gives the appearance that you're wearing a mask, but has no functionality whatsoever.
So you're not opposed to mask wearing at all, right?
Oh, what do you mean opposed?
You're opposed. You're not opposed to the idea of wearing a mask. You're not one of these people who's just refusing to wear a mask.
No, I'm wearing a mask just for cosmetic reasons.
Oh, really?
Well, like I said, this is cheesecloth. It doesn't do anything. You can see me.
So, are you wearing a poorly performing mask as a protest?
No, I'm wearing because I want to breathe.
But you can breathe without the mask.
Well, no, but this way I don't want to have to deal with the head. Like my gym, like you needed to wear a mask to work out. I'm like, okay.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So that's fine. I mean, I've just got to the point where I'm kind of done with it. But again.
Oh, no, my new power move, which I like to do, is I'm on the subway in New York and I have the mask on my wrist. So they see that I have it, but I'm not wearing it.
And then you should, cough into it.
But no one says anything. And then that encourages other people to be like, what am I doing?
Yeah. Well, I think there's that kind of realization Es-
I
Especially
don't
in
have
the
the
home.
symptom. It's this. First of all, this is there's something almost demonic about it because there's is as far as I know, because the science is all over the place on this stuff. There's no such thing as asymptomatic spread. So I have had no symptoms. I'm not sick. I got tested when I was on Rogan, came back negative. So listen, at a certain point, you're going to have to take responsibility for your own health, just as with AIDS. You have to assume whoever you're interacting with has it and take precautions or take those risks and be responsible for them.
But I mean, you accept it and believe it's a thing. Because in the Bitcoin world, we have a spectrum of
Spectrum's the right word, isn't it?
spectrum of people, and there's
There's a
certain
lot.
people who like
Everyone's on the spectrum there.
who do not believe even that this is real.
That what's real? That
That
COVID doesn't
COVID is
exist.
real. Yeah, there are even people who don't believe it's real.
I believe COVID
Yeah,
is real.
so I believe it's real. I believe it kills people. I believe, like you, it's people who are diabetic or overweight, old, and then just the odd random person that's unexplainable.
Sure.
Could be a 13-year-old kid.
Just like a 13-year-old kid could have pneumonia and die.
Of
And
course.
it's a tragedy and it's horrible.
Yeah. But in terms of containing spread, say, for country to country, what do you think about border controls in a time of COVID?
I think that it's like the Central American Indians. At a certain point, you can't keep those borders permanently, right?
Mhm.
So what's going to end up happening at some point, someone's going to cross that border. We've all seen the movies.
Mhm.
From my understanding, it's literally impossible to have one country, even North Korea, which obviously I've done work with there and I've been there, to seal a country so hermetically that no one is ever going to come in with COVID. I don't see how that's possible.
So we have to accept the wave comes and
I mean, isn't that basically what they did? They're like, all right, we got in this German wave or whatever, this Turkish wave.
Well, we have the Indian
Indian one, yeah.
in the UK now. Okay, that's fair. Okay, back to here, because you said you feel like the politicians here need to face consequences. Cuomo, De Blasio,
not just here, everywhere.
Yeah, but is it De Blasio?
De Blasio, the mayor, yeah.
What consequences do you feel they should face?
Well, I mean, I can't be answering that question really, but they're pretty bad.
But in an anarchist society,
what consequences do you think people who kill the elderly to further their career should face? That's my answer.
I think, right. I mean, that's a very direct accusation that they've killed the elderly.
Okay.
How do you explain how they killed the elderly?
What consequences do you think people who send children overseas to slaughter or be slaughtered should face? Who send young men and women in the military overseas out of where they're safe here, put them into harm's way. What consequence to kill or to be killed?
Yeah.
What consequences should they face? Lying to do this.
Yeah, and again, it depends on the scenario. But
No.
well, in World War II, when we sent young men to fight and support the British in defeating the Germans and taking back France, I believe that was a noble goal, and I believe it was the right thing to do. Despite the, you said that, you can't comprehend the numbers of people who died.
Right.
I've been watching that World War II in color, and it's just like, I just cannot get my head around it. I believe that was a necessary and just war.
What about World War I?
I don't know enough about World War One. That's
Okay.
the problem. You can tell me, teach me about it, and I can give you an answer, but I don't know. All I know is I know enough for World War II to know that the defeat of the Nazis was something that should have happened.
Sure.
And there's very few wars that I understand in detail. When Vietnam, was it Vietnam? They entered into Cambodia to defeat Pol
Right.
Pot. For me, that was a necessary war. And
I don't think that was to defeat Pol Pot. I mean, they were bombing them, the Vietnamese, from Cambodia, and they were basically crossing the border illegally. Was the situation?
Okay, I mean, you'll probably know better than me, but what I'm saying, there's certain scenarios where a war does feel just. If you're saying in terms of the Iraq War, I mean, I think every one of those people should stand trial. We've got the guy who's appealing right now from the Balkans War. I forget his name. Who's up in the Hague for war crimes? What happened during? I think it's in Srebrenica. And I think there is more of a reason for Tony Blair to be facing the war crimes tribunal in the Hague. I think George Bush. I even think, sadly, Colin Powell. I mean,
this is great. This is wonderful.
He
You're
just lied.
9/10 of the way there.
But I've been very clear even before Bitcoin that I believe Tony Blair is a lying war criminal. And somebody opened my eyes recently. Do you know a guy called Alex Gladstein?
No, I don't think so.
I'll talk to you about him afterwards. I think you'd love to have him on your show. He's a Bitcoiner, but he works for the Human Rights Foundation.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, he's a wonderful human being. But he was explaining to me recently that because I never understood what the Iraq War was about. And he said it happened not long after Saddam Hussein started selling oil for euros to protect the petrodollar. That's essentially that war. Now, if people are lying and sending people to war to defend the status of the petrodollar, you're just criminals to me. Yes. But you should stand for trial, and you should be tried either as a war criminal. But as an anarchist, do you believe you should have The Hague trying people?
I'll take what I can get.
You'll take what you can get.
Yeah.
So
that's one of those compromises I'm happy with.
Yeah, within the confines of.
I don't know about The Hague, but yeah.
Well, they should face trial somewhere, and they should face time in prison, maybe worse.
That would be my compromise.
That would be your compromise. Are there just wars?
Sure.
Yeah.
I don't think Iraq was even close to just war.
No, I absolutely agree.
Yeah, and again, we spoke earlier about what can the state do well. I mean, the not only was the Iraq War a disaster, the consequences were complete disasters, and it set a very bad precedent. What people tend to forget, you and I are a little older, is that George Bush was inaugurated January of 2001. September 11th was obviously September, so there's 9 months there. They were talking beforehand, brazenly, about are we going to go and finish the job that George W. Bush's father had started. So there was just not even a pretense that, maybe it's not a good idea for the largest military on earth to be throwing their weight around and just invading countries whenever they feel like it, just because the guy at the top is a dictator. Now, you can make that argument very easily. I mean, I do not think Saddam Hussein has some kind of right to life, that he should be respected, he should be revered, that he should be treated, that if someone took him out, it's reason to applaud. Just that specific thing. But there's a bigger issue, which I think people would be concerned about, is when you have this kind of military might makes right situation, that is, you have to ask yourself, are we the bad guys? Because historically speaking, if you read comic books even, the bad guy is the one who wants to conquer the world. And when you want to have this kind of Pax Americana, that every country on earth has to basically be some kind of liberal democracy in the American model, that is, just because we're the good guys, just ask us, we're the good guys, that is really kind of disturbing.
So you're not the good guys?
The government, no. The government's never the good guys.
Yeah. Or in any scenario.
Well, they could be the better guys.
Yeah. Yeah, because I'm wondering right now, we saw the news yesterday with El Salvador.
Yes.
I mean, this movement that, they've made Bitcoin legal tender. You have to, as an economic agent, you legally have to now accept Bitcoin.
That's wonderful.
It's incredible, amazing. What is the response from the US state going to be to this? I wonder. Will they ban remittance now?
That's a very good question. And I'm frankly surprised. I was on a panel show with the guy, I'm blanking on his name, and he had been Obama's chief economic advisor.
Okay.
So he's very high up in the Democratic Party, which is obviously the center-left party here in the States. And he could not be more for Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting there thinking, this was designed to completely destroy your schemes, right? And I didn't say this, of course, but I was delighted to have so many people who are statists, maybe not cucks. I'm not calling you a cuck. I don't think he's a cuck, but who are absolute unmitigated statists. He sat in the Oval Office, advocating for increasing economic control by the state. For someone like that to be pushing Bitcoin, I just think it's absolutely wonderful, because I think it's just going to be complete poison to them.
Well, we have Senator Cynthia Lummis of Wyoming. She is pro-Bitcoin. We have Congressman Warren Davidson in Ohio, pro-Bitcoin. Mayor Francis in Miami.
Oh, yeah. But these are all on the right side of the Republican Party, is my understanding, right?
Yeah.
So we're talking about someone who is really part of this progressive, in the sense of having these elites, basically Fabian society, guide the country. For him to see the merits of Bitcoin, which are undeniable, but I don't think he appreciated the danger it would be to their control.
There's very few people on the left who are big fans of Bitcoin. It's definitely a libertarian or right to center right, something that people from those kind of ends of the political spectrum seem to be a fan of. And I guess what it is, it doesn't fit within the kind of construct of the social safety net.
Or centralized control, more important.
Centralized control.
That's the issue.
But there is centralized control even on the right.
Oh, of course, but those are the statist cucks on the right. Yeah,
yeah, I guess so. I've deviated. I want to come back to the Bitcoin because I kind of want to finish on that with you. But
Sure.
one thing I didn't really probably get to with you is this idea of how 360 million people do coordinate in an anarchist society. I'm not going to use the word utopian. I saw Lex mention that, and I saw.
How does eBay work?
Well, eBay is a marketplace,
Right.
an online digital
So
marketplace,
I'm in America,
but it has rules.
set by eBay, right?
Mhm.
So that's one example of, I'm sure the user base, maybe it's not 300 million. I'm sure it's some extreme number.
Yeah.
I'm here in New York. You're in the UK. I buy something from you. You either screw me over or it gets lost overseas. eBay has an arbitration system that resolves within a day. If I try to use and the possibility of state action between us is zero. I can't really sue you if you're in Britain and I'm in America in terms of getting my shirt back. The cost for that would be prohibitive. This is the other big lie about government, is the claim that, well, we have to have government because otherwise the poorest of the poor are screwed. The poorest of the poor have no access to government as a mediation device. To buy a lawyer is more expensive than buying a surgeon. They are the first ones who are going to be priced out, and the powerful people will always have better access to lawyers. And the law is, there's a great essay in here by John Hasness, who's a college professor at Georgetown Law. The law will always be interpreted in favor of ideology, and that ideology will inevitably in favor of the powerful in order to sustain itself. So if you have something like eBay, you do have much more of a sense of equality, because here are the facts from, I'm the buyer, I paid him, here's Peter's facts, here's the bill of sale, eBay resolves it. Even if I don't get the result I want, which would be the case in a court system, at the very least, I'm saving myself time and money. So right away, you have an enormous advantage. Now, in terms of scaling to 350 million, it doesn't have to. Give us Bermuda. You guys do whatever the heck you want. The Isle of Wight, do whatever you want. The rest of the world, let us be free. So even if you're claiming that anarchist society wouldn't scale, there are plenty of tiny countries on Earth right now, and they're thriving.
Tiny countries, but they're not anarchists. They still have a
Correct.
democracy.
But there's many. But my point is, if your argument is this won't work unless it's 350 million people, I don't care. Like, let's let it have 10,000 people have whatever they want. It doesn't. It's not a numbers game. And there's many of these small countries, by the way, that don't have militaries.
Why do you stay in the US then, just out of interest?
Because
are you still like a proud American, like, or you just forget nationalism?
I'm a very, very proud American. Which I love this country. I hate the government because I love this country. With anything, like when you're buying a car, when you're buying a house, when you're choosing a girlfriend, or you're buying a book, there's many, many factors to factor into. Now, liberty for me is an extremely high factor, but so are things like culture, so are things like my family, my friends, and you have to weigh all these factors that every individual does. What anarchism does is it gives you the maximum amount of those choices and lowers costs to the absolute minimum.
So how do you get there then? Like, what are the steps you can take? 'Cause one of the things I imagine is that certainly in our lifetime, we won't see the US as an anarchist society, but perhaps maybe we'll hyper-Bitcoinize.
I don't think so.
But is it, for you personally, is it just about teaching people about anarchism, or do you kind of accept that we have the state, there's a pull and pull on the left and the right, and perhaps if there's a growth in anarchism, that also pulls the society into a better direction?
Yes, but I also think that, as I said earlier, anarchism is a relationship, and anarchism is the norm. Number one. Number two is, I think we are far faster than I could have ever dreamed. The success of this book was indicative of this.
Yeah.
It was the top nonfiction book on Amazon for an entire day. Number 3 on all of Amazon, behind Dr. Seuss and a novel whose name I don't remember.
I thought Dr. Seuss was banned.
Well, no, I think this is, some of them were, right?
Yeah.
The fact that there was this huge audience for my work and the work of the people whose essays are in this book completely threw me off guard. I didn't have a big launch. I didn't have a rollout, and it's selling ridiculously highly well. I think what we're seeing is, you're seeing it in European parliaments. Like the Swedish government has like 9 parties. Czech has like 12. Now the Greens are picking up speed in the UK. In Germany, the two major parties aren't able between them to get 50%, which with countries like the US and UK, to have the 2 parties who are the top between them not get 50% makes no sense to us, because it's going to be 95, right? You're going to have the Lib Dems maybe get their 5%, but it's going to be 95 Tory or Labour. So to have this increase, if you go to a supermarket in the 80s, comedians used to joke about like, oh, you have caffeine-free Diet Pepsi now, ha ha ha. We have infinite choices in every other endeavor, but in politics, it's supposed to be reduced to a binary. If my choices are Coke or Pepsi, maybe I want water. So I think there is an increasing understanding that the state is inherently illegitimate. There's an increasing understanding that many of our neighbors do not think like we do and never will think like we do. And any system that is predicated on getting a large part of our neighbors to think like we do is a Sisyphean affair that's doomed to failure. And people are looking for alternatives. And what anarchism is, having citizenship by geography, I always say, is landline technology in a post-smartphone world. Like if I'm trying to call you, I'm trying to call Peter. I don't call your house in the UK because you're traveling a lot. There's no reason your security, your person can't be a function of that as well, as opposed to which two oceans you happen to be between.
Well, I think there's probably many people like me who are slowly, more recently come to realize like we've been lied to a lot.
Yes.
I think the pandemic actually has done a lot for
the
anarchist movement. I've got friends at home who previously, by the way, and I've got I've been talking about Bitcoin to them for years. They don't give a shit. They're like, shut up, P, about this Bitcoin thing. But more recently, it's not that they're asking me about Bitcoin. We've got a friend who's organizing a birthday, and she was sending text rounds, and she was saying, we're going to this one, and we have to wear a mask to walk in the entrance. And she was just saying, and then she messaged me privately. She's like, I don't fucking get it anymore. Nothing makes sense.
What about
anymore.
the restaurants where you wear a mask to walk in, and then when you sit down, you take the mask off? Because obviously only standing can you spread COVID.
Of course. But the point being is, this is somebody who historically would not have considered maybe a book like yours, but she's peeling back the layers and goes, this is all fucking nonsense.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of people realizing this. I think a lot of people are starting to realize, like, this pandemic, we've just been lied to so much. Things don't make sense.
And it's also empowered urban, educated leftist elites to feel that their constant state of anxiety and depression or whatever it is has an external source. And it's also allowed low status people to have a position to assert dominance over others, because now you have an excuse to go up to that person and get in their face and enforce the rules of the master class.
Put your mask on.
Yes.
Put your mask
now
on.
I have a way to assert dominance over someone else, whereas previously I was completely powerless.
What is that about, though? Why are people like that?
But just evolutionary psychology, I think, don't you think?
Doesn't it worry you? I mean, look, I talked to, who was I talked to? There's a libertarian guy I talked to, I forgot his name, Scott Horton. I had a great chat with Scott Horton. And we talked about the big red button. If you had the big red button, he said, no, that would be a terrible idea. That everything would be in a mess. The big red button, you can turn off the state immediately. Suddenly there's no government.
He's against it?
Yes, because he says that's chaos. He said, what you need to do is wean yourself off the state in some way.
Oh, Jesus.
I'm like, don't hold me to this. I want to check it, but I'm almost certain he said the big red button would be problematic. My question more to you is this not just a natural way that humans organize? So imagine we had the big red button. Tomorrow there's no government and we all have to arrange ourselves. Do we suddenly just repeat the same mistakes because of who we are as humans? Maybe you're an outcast who would want to coordinate in a free way with me, but there are people like, I just want someone else to organize this. So we create groups and then we create governance, and then suddenly we have the guys with the money and the guns, and we end up recreating what we have now.
So that is I'm not trying to use this word in a pejorative sense.
No, it's fine if you are.
That is a fairy tale, because that is how governments claim that they came into being. But no, the first essay in this is by William Godwin, I believe his name is. I want to get it. William Godwin from 1793.
Yeah.
And he goes after Rousseau with this idea of the social contract. No government has ever so much as even pretended that this is how it created. All governments are a function of conquest or domination, number one. Number two is, I strongly disagree, and I think if you think about this, you'd agree with me, that simply because there's this is some mistake people get in anarchism, just because there's some semblance of organization, that therefore it's a government. It's completely not true. If I go into Macy's, the department store, or Harrods, to use your vernacular, and there's you can only buy, if you want to buy red currants, it's one per customer. Males aren't allowed into the women's clothing section for whatever dubious reason. Maybe you have to have a membership card to walk in. They're just setting up a new program. None of that is a government. These are all systems of organization. So while I agree with you completely that human beings, when we get together, we do organize. This was an organization right here. That no way implies that this organization has to be involuntary or has to be imposed by a government.
Okay.
But I agree. But neither of this is hypothetical. If you go online, people can find this in 2 seconds. There's a video of, there was some place, I forget where it was, I think it's Barcelona, where the traffic lights broke. It wasn't car accidents. They very quickly like had a system where it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, and everyone takes turns, because people by their nature prefer to cooperate, not because they're generally kind, but because conflict and violence is very, very expensive. If you have a knife fight, you're getting stabbed, even if you win.
Yes. So why does the state exist? Is it just certain people psychopaths are drawn into this role where they want to control people? Is it greed? What
gives them power, gives them status. Think about it. In America, you're spending $1 billion to get a $200,000 a year job, the presidency.
Yeah, but I find the US very different from the UK.
Okay.
I think one of the big differences is the lobbying system.
Sure.
And how much it appears that politicians can monetize their role whilst in power. In the UK, they tend to monetize it afterwards.
Sure. Yeah. Thatcher left office with having literally $0 in her bank.
Yeah. And Tony Blair gets X amount for his speaking
speeches,
whilst he should be in jail. But I do also believe there are good politicians who do want to do a good job, who really do support their constituents. It isn't just about power.
Oh, I agree with you.
Yeah.
But a great example of this is the church, the Catholic Church. So for centuries, the church had military and they had the Crusades, and they were in a position to basically impose the Catholic worldview onto the countries where they had dominion. Then you had things like the anti-popes in France, where French people said this is the Pope, and Rome said this is the Pope. Now that the Vatican doesn't really, the Vatican doesn't really have an army, or it's certainly a small one. It's a tiny country contained entirely within Italy. You look at the Pope, with John Paul, or the current one, Francis, as a man of peace. You look at him as a moral exemplar. I'm not Catholic. You can listen to him. Maybe people don't like him because he's left of center, whatever, so on and so forth. But it never enters your head that even for a Catholic person, many Catholic people are like, I'm pro-choice. Like I'm a strong Catholic. I believe in the Pope, but I take umbrage with him on this issue, and so on and so forth. And the church allows for a certain amount of that. So there's no reason why in a free society you wouldn't have people who are community organizers, who are pointing out. This is busybodies at their best, when they're like, hey, this disease has gotten no attention and these kids are suffering because there's not that many of them to make enough of a fuss. I'm going to be the one who's going to get the bullhorn. Or, look, what's going on with this river. Let's all get together and figure out a way to make sure there's not pollution. So, yeah, there's absolutely a mechanism for people who want to make the world a better place, and who in some ways are drawn to politics because they have certain talents that are not at all nefarious. But there's no reason for them to be having the mechanism of the state. And they certainly have a role in a free society, as I just described.
So how do we end the state? How do we do it? How does it happen?
Well, as
I know it's a big question.
As Hemingway said, gradually and then suddenly.
Gradually and suddenly. That's a term we use in Bitcoin, mate.
Yeah, of course.
Parker Lewis. I actually released a show today with a guy called Parker Lewis, and it's from his Gradually and Then Suddenly series.
Is that his real name?
Parker Lewis.
Because there was a show in the 90s, which I was a huge fan of, called Parker Lewis Can't Lose. It was a rip of Ferris Bueller. And Corin Nemec followed me, the actor, on Twitter, and it completely blew my mind, and I was so giddy.
Dude, he's another smart guy. We got a lot of smart people in Bitcoin.
I know it.
Yeah.
I'm very familiar with the space.
Yeah.
So one of the big things that Trump did very well, and that Boris Johnson does well as well, is to encourage people to realize that those who are ostensibly our leaders are often clowns and are deserving of derision at best. And this certainly applies from both sides of the aisle, or in many sides of the aisle in multi-party parliamentary systems. So that, I think, once people wake up and they're like, wait a minute, why am I bending the knee to these really horrible, mediocre people who are self-serving? And you can't blame them. More power to them, in a sense. Like, what do you expect them to do? And I think it's just going to be that, and also things where mechanisms are put in place where enforcement becomes impossible. That will also be, and this kind of cynicism towards the law will be of great use. Here's an example in the States. I think it was 1990. It was quite a while ago. Colorado decided to have medical marijuana. Now, it was legal on a state level. They had, I believe, a referendum. People voted for it. It was still grossly, completely illegal on a federal level. Because we have state law, we have federal law. They went for it anyway. There were raids from the federal government. This was just system defiance. At a certain point, you have enough states who have either decriminalized marijuana or legalized it entirely. It's still illegal. The federal government at any moment can go in and shut any of these down. They're blatant defines federal law. The point is, at a certain point, the cost of enforcement outweigh the benefits. Same thing that happened with prohibition, same things with other things. So one way to end the power of the state is A, to decrease its power in terms of legitimacy and respect, but also B, increase the costs of imposing its worldview.
It would almost be helpful if we had a form of money that the government didn't control, that was completely decentralized.
Or several forms of money.
Tricky area.
Okay, yeah.
Tricky area.
Well, that's what freedom is all about.
Do you know, as an anarchist, when Bitcoin came along, that must have been one of the pieces of the puzzle that's missing, because it's very hard to trade with gold. And you can't, you have to have a form of money. You don't want state money. What was the solution before Bitcoin?
But here's there was. I mean, one way that's going to solve here's two things.
Yeah.
The other good thing about Bitcoin is it's allowing the right people to get very, very wealthy very quietly. And that is a really important thing, number one. Number two is, I forgot my train of thought.
Well, it tends to attract the weirdos and the outsiders and the outcasts in some way or another. We've all just been together in Miami having a great time, but everyone seems to have some kind of like screwed up story in the past. Yeah, you were talking about maybe many monies, and I said it's a tricky subject. What I was saying is,
so I was telling you, I remember my train of thought. Censorship.
Yes.
Right? I use this example in my previous book, Then You Write. Let's suppose it's 20 years ago, you and I are having an argument over censorship. And you say, freedom of speech, you can't ban any books, so on and so forth. And I'm like, hold on a minute. What about books like Mein Kampf? What about books that are filled with lies that cause, violence in our cultures? What about things like child pornography? And we can argue back and forth all we want. Parker Lewis appears magically from 2021 and says, hold on, fellas, like this argument is moot. Where I come from, you can duplicate any book infinitely and send it anywhere on earth at the speed of light. And you could also make it so only someone who knows the magic word can even read the book, right? And Mr. Parker Lewis, how much does this cost? Oh, it's free. We would think he's a lunatic,
he's
right?
Crazy,
or this is going to be 1,000 years in the future, but that's the status quo. That is currently the reality. So things like Bitcoin, things like the ability of humans to move quickly, it's really easy. The problem the state has is whatever freedom we have with our money or with our books, we could still be locked in jail. If there was a way, I don't know how this would entail, this would be a technological thing, where that was not a possibility, they're really SOL. So I'm all in when it comes to technology being what liberates us.
But what was, prior to Bitcoin, what was the anarchist view on what would be money? Because
it
money
was the gold standard.
It was the gold
ending
standard.
the Fed, yes. But this has been discussed for a long time.
But gold isn't really a great medium of exchange for a number of reasons, which we know as Bitcoin is why we think it's better than gold.
Correct, but gold is certainly better than the Fed and having fiat currency.
Are you now in the boat of Bitcoin is the best form of money ever, period?
I would say crypto, sure. I don't know enough about I really don't want to hear it from the audience. I don't know enough about the different.
Do not give him shit.
They can. I mean, I'm pretty block heavy.
Yeah.
I don't know enough about the different shit coins and Ethereum and so on and so forth. But yes, I'm absolutely a crypto person.
I mean, I'm not the smartest Bitcoiner. That is known. My understanding that I've come to between Bitcoin and shitcoins is the one thing that Bitcoin has focused so heavily on is decentralization.
Sure.
We fought a civil war over it. We keep the block size very small. So whether you're here in New York or whether you're in El Salvador, living in El Zonte, or you're in Nigeria, or you're in China, or you can spin up a laptop, you can download the entire blockchain, and you can verify every transaction. Bitcoin has done that brilliantly, and that's what gives us censorship resistance, and that's what helps us maintain it trustless. It's just that's what it's focused on. Whereas something like Ethereum it's been created for dApps and smart contracts. I think the whole Bitcoin blockchain is something like 350 gigabytes, whereas
that's it,
something like that.
Okay,
yeah, I mean you can literally download it to your laptop, whereas Ethereum is something like 4 terabytes.
But Peter, how are you going to coordinate a system of 350 million Bitcoiners without the state?
well, you have a form of money,
Right.
which
Yeah.
can coordinate
Right.
ourselves. So I'd be interested in. I'm surprised you haven't gone more down the Bitcoin rabbit hole. Actually, it feels very aligned to what you're doing.
Other than pro-life people, I haven't found any population that are more off-putting in terms of being bad at promoting their worldview than the Bitcoin people.
You think so?
Yes.
See, this is what Lex felt. This is what Weinstein felt. This is what Elon is feeling right now. This seems to be a common kind of view. And it's funny. I sometimes go back and forth. Sometimes when I'm...
I think it's a range.
Yeah. It's
completely
another
range.
spectrum.
Yeah.
How do you think we're bad then? What do you think we get wrong?
I think there is this... I wouldn't say we. Because again, it is a big population. And
a certain Bitcoiners.
I think...
What's the bits that you're finding negative?
Sure. There is a certain type of Bitcoiner who thinks it's just binary.
Mm-hmm.
If you are claiming you're for freedom and you're not talking about Bitcoin as your primary mechanism of achieving that freedom, you're a phony or a liar. And there's also a kind of this purity test where they're more than happy to dismiss someone. It's like, well, you're not of use because you're not orange pilled. So cool. If I'm not of use to you, that is certainly your prerogative, and we can both live our free lives. I hope you thrive. I hope you succeed, and we can just walk our separate ways.
The toxicity thing seems to be this barrier that people hit. I think it's more of a problem if you've already got a profile.
Well, let me take a step back.
Yeah.
So Dave Smith is trying to be the Libertarian candidate for president of the Libertarian Party.
Yes,
he's a very failed comedian. And he asked me to be his press secretary. And I said, I will only do it if I have financial security, meaning that if the corporate media comes after me and tries to ruin my life, that I still won't be homeless. And the only money I'm taking is either Bitcoin or Ethereum. So my rate is going to be, once I have one Bitcoin a month, and it's going to be a public wallet, I'm going to hodl it until election day 2024. Once that's taken care of, then I'll sign on. So I am putting my money where my mouth is. Now, for a certain amount of people, I'm still the enemy or a fellow traveler, whatever term they want to use. And that's their prerogative. But I think when and I'm also a Velvet Rope person. So I do appreciate that when you find something that really is magical and wonderful, that you want to be protective of it, and you want to be its champion, and you want to be like, look, I found this, truth, and everything else you're saying is like Plato's cave. You don't get it. This is really the way. I get that mindset a lot. I'm just saying that if your strategy is to get me to be more aligned with you, you're not going about it the right way. I don't mean you personally.
Yeah, no, but actually, this is one of those steps. This conversation was one of those steps. It's for me to learn a bit more about you and my audience to learn a little bit more about you and because sometimes, I could make the same point about some anarchists.
Sure.
They don't approach it in the right way for me because
I'm better than all of them.
You're great. I'm asking probably very amateur questions that you're used to, and I'm just figuring out my own journey with this. But some anarchists for me are very, toxic with it.
Oh,
like,
sure.
Fuck you. Yeah, I've told you, fuck you. You're a statist. Get the fuck out of it. Like there's a group who call me a spook. They think I'm a government spook. And that's quite aggressive there as well. So,
sure.
I mean, I could make the same point back at some anarchists, but maybe they're just Bitcoin anarchists.
No, but you're not wrong.
Yeah.
I'm not here to, people can't wrap their heads around here.
Yeah.
I'm not here primarily to promote anarchism. I'm not here to promote anything. I am interested, if I could spread anything, it's happiness and joy.
Yeah.
And I believe very fervently that anarchism maximizes the possibility for people to achieve happiness and joy in their lives. But it's secondary to that goal.
Yeah, it's funny because I see Bitcoin as maximizing the opportunity to achieve freedom.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, we're seeing a country trying...
But it's a means to an end.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a chance to, defund the state.
Yes.
Reduce tax payments. It's essentially free right now. We're seeing in real time, a country free itself from the US dollar.
The advantages are so overwhelming in so many different ways that I don't think it's an easy sell.
Mm.
So in terms of persuasion, I'm a little good at it because I probably spread anarchism more than anyone else on earth. That I don't think, when people are bad at persuasion, it's very useful to be like, come in very aggressive and antagonistic. Then when you don't persuade the person, it's like, oh, it's their fault. It's not. Sometimes it's your fault.
Yeah.
If that is your goal, is to persuade people. My goal is not necessarily persuade people because I'm not a democracy person.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And you are persuasive.
Sure.
Yeah. Today I don't even know how to put it. It's like, I think I'm at that kind of final stage of like fully shedding.
I think once you read the book, a lot of things will fall into place.
It wasn't the book I expected.
Okay.
Firstly, I just expected a book of your writings.
Okay.
So I read the start and I was like really into it. And then I was like, oh, okay. And so I found myself picking and choosing and then skipping and skimming. Yep. But actually, I think I think I need another book before that. I think I need just like, I ended up reading, was it Chomsky's book on anarchism?
Manufacturing Consent? Which
no,
one?
it was another book.
Okay.
Chomsky, it's like...
Chomsky's a tough one. That's
yeah,
not the way
and
to
again,
do it.
I struggle with that. I just kind of need a book on anarchism, but that's somebody just explaining it to me.
What about Economics in One Lesson? Have you read that one?
I've read that, yeah. That book's fantastic. Yeah, that book's... What else would you recommend? Like, for the listeners as well.
I don't know that what I would recommend, this is how I learn any subject, is I would read the Anarchist Handbook, and there's like 20 thinkers in here from all ranges of the Black Flag. And if someone picks your interest, read a whole book of theirs.
Okay.
And follow your train of thought where it goes.
Yeah. Definitely at that point where I have questioned everything. I am rethinking everything, from my children's education to money, to work, to my relationships with people, to how I've even reflected on how in the past I think maybe I've enforced my own authority on people, like my children, even in ways that I'm not proud of. Like, you need a job, so you must do this and don't waste your schooling. Now I'm like, my son wanted to be here, and it was like, I know you got to do your schooling.
Here in New York?
No, just with me on this trip.
Yeah.
And I was like, why the fuck is he not with me?
Right.
Like, what an education. Sat here listening to this.
Yeah. And I'll give you a parallel. I think it's very healthy what's happening with you, and I'm very excited to hear it. I'll give you a similar example. In 2004, I think it was, Harvey Pekar of American Splendor fame, he had a movie coming out, and Ted Hope, who was the producer, sent out an email to his company that said, Harvey's in town with nothing to do. If you want to hang out with him, this is your chance. No one took him up on it other than me. And Harvey ended up writing a book about me, which now goes for $500 on eBay, if you can believe it. But the point is, people are so used to having their blinders and just, going through the motions that they very rarely even stop. Even if it was still the right decision for him to go to school, I think it's very healthy to be like, wait, hold on. Like, I'm on autopilot. Is this really such a cost? And what are the benefits here? And when you start questioning, here's another great example that I used to work. I was using, this is 20 years ago. I did tech support for Goldman Sachs, which is a very nefarious organization.
That's surprising.
Yeah, it was what it was. And they would want you, they couldn't understand. I'm using this very specifically and literally, my teammates, that I would prefer to stay home than to work overtime. Because A, you're getting time and a half. So it's not like you're volunteering. You're getting paid. And B, the team needs you. I don't care about Goldman. Like, this place can burn to the ground. I'm not. If it does well, it does not. I'm salaried. I don't care.
Yeah.
Number two is my time, because I was trying to be an author back then. I would rather have that hour than to have that time and a half money. And it just didn't. It was like talking to a wall. Because most people just basically take what the choices are as given and never even, and this is just specifically an anarchist thing, never like, well, hold on a minute. Like, yeah, this is, I'm supposed to send my kid to school, but if we go to New York, we go to some museums, maybe he sits and watches his dad. He maybe think dad's cooler than he is because he's watching dad work his magic. Like, what do it really cost here? And I think I would strongly encourage more people to think in those terms.
Yeah, no, I definitely am. I mean, I'm going to have to do some negotiations with the ex-wife, but I'm with you on the time thing as well. That I used to have not a corporate job. I used to work in London in advertising and long, stressful hours. to get to that point where you have the freedom over your
Yeah.
time, you can wake up like this being work is a blessing. And I feel very fortunate.
I wake
to
up
do
at
all this.
11 every day, bed at 2 a.m. every day.
Oh, well, I still get up at 6 to 7, but I get to choose my day.
Yes.
You know, I mean, my commitment is to you today, but this is pleasure. This is fun. This is incredible. I get to choose my time, and I think not enough people are lucky enough to have that or pursue it, maybe because they pursue money or status.
And Peter, what is better than like, hey, I remember 20 years ago I went to New York with my dad.
I know,
and we got this like little magnet. Like, this is what life is about.
We chat every day. Actually, I did get some dad points the other day because I was at the conference and Jake Paul was there, and I got him to FaceTime my son, and I was like the coolest dad in the world for 24 hours. He would like this. He's questioning everything himself. He's like, why am I at school, Dad?
I also just like any relationship, your girlfriend, your friend, your nephew, the two of you for 3 days, like us against the world, that is like the best memories ever. That's quality time at the 10th degree.
It's funny you should say that. I met this girl in Miami. I haven't dated for ages, and we got on really well. God, she might even like me saying this. So she's working in real estate, and she was like, I love what you're doing here. I was like, well, why don't you quit your job and come out here?
Yeah.
She quit her job today.
Hell yeah.
Literally quit her job today. She is on a plane right now over here. I'm going to get a load of shit online for this, but yeah, she's literally flying here now.
That's so wonderful.
She's quit a job, and I was like, just come and do this with me.
There's this great. Ayn Rand gets a bad rap. You mentioned earlier.
I've interviewed Yaron Brook.
Yeah. You've seen me on Lex with Yaron. There's this moment when she's and I just hope everyone just, if you don't like Rand, just give me 30 seconds of your time because you're going to like this quote.
Yeah.
Okay. She's on Donahue, and he goes, "You've liberated thousands of people with your books where you tell them, if you want to do it, do it." And she goes, and the audience applauds. She goes, "Thank you. And if I've helped them, I'm delighted." And I think we're born knowing that life is a magical adventure, and it takes them years to train us to believe otherwise. So freedom, like that girl, it's like, this is the thing. This is what drove me crazy. I was a business major because I knew that would be the best credential in terms of getting a job. And I saw so many and when I first graduated school, I was temping because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I figured if I bounce around, it's like roulette. At some point, I'm going to get a high-paying job that I enjoy. Because you're going to get the low-paying jobs you don't enjoy, you're going to get all over the bell curve. And, having this kind of sense of the Faustian bargain, you sell your soul and you become the top author, or you become, you have a mansion, you have this beautiful girlfriend, or whatever it is. To sell your soul to make 50 grand a year at the same desk for 20 years, that's not the Faustian bargain. I get why you'd want to sell your soul, but sell it so you could do this. Sell it so at the drop of a hat, you could take your family to Japan because there's some concert your son or daughter wants to see. That is what you sell your soul for. But here's the beauty of it. You don't have to sell it. You could keep it.
Yeah.
You get to keep your soul and do all these things. And especially when you're young, like I'm so encouraging of young people who ask me this. It goes, even if you fail, when you're older, you're going to look back and be delighted that you tried, as opposed to driving that desk and dying, I know, a very real sense, when you're 22.
Well, the funny thing is, it feels risky sometimes, quitting a job and going out.
It's very risky.
But it's also very risky staying in it.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not risky. It's a certainty that you are going to be in a hamster wheel, and you're helping make other people rich.
And you're 10 years are going to pass, and you're not going to know what's happened.
Right. It's very different when you have a family. So I'll give them credit for that. Like, you have to make these sacrifices. Look, I don't have many options. I'm not educated. I got to put food on the table. I get it. But if you have that space, do something with it.
Yeah. I mean, look, I've got children.
Yeah.
But, and there's a lot of luck in this, in my own personal situation, but I can at least say to my children who don't have children, thankfully, I can say to them, you don't have to follow this hamster wheel. You don't have. I mean, I'm saying that there's actually an art college here he wants to go to, and
Which
one? Press. I've got it written down somewhere. It's the one that Ai Weiwei went to and Tom Ford.
Okay,
I can't remember the name. I'm going to go and see it tomorrow and just find out about Parsons. Yeah. He's interested, and as he's an artist,
great school.
I don't mind, and therefore he kind of has to finish school to get into that.
Sure,
and I'm cool with that. If he was going to study something like I did, or if he's going to go and study marketing, I would be like, it's just not worth it, dude. that is because he's an artist. I think that's something worth considering. And I think being out in New York would be great for him.
Very stimulating.
Yeah. So there's two things left that I haven't asked you that I did want to ask you about. Libertarians and anarchists.
Sure.
Where do they differ?
6 months.
6 months. That's the joke, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. But the difference to me seems to be that libertarians seem to be more willing to engage in politics. It's not all, but some are willing to engage in politics. Ron Paul is a great example.
Sure.
And that at least you can try and attack it from the inside. Like you talked about multiple parties like we have in the UK. You've got this binary system here. Wouldn't it be great to have that third libertarian party?
No.
No? Okay, great. But you must be a fan of Ron Paul.
Of course, but Ron Paul ran as a libertarian. He also ran as a Republican twice. Where did he make the Ron Paul movement? It wasn't as a libertarian.
No. But it seems to me that libertarians are more willing to engage in politics. And if you just look at them and go, I'll see you in 6 months.
Well, I mean, I'm very engaged in politics.
Yeah.
I mean, so I'm not. I don't believe in the validity of the electoral process, but I'm certainly someone who's basically his job is to be engaged in politics.
And if you were willing to be press secretary for Dave Smith,
yeah.
So you are willing to engage in the process of something that you think is illegitimate. How does that compute for me?
Well, I mean, I don't have a choice. Like I did jury duty. And when I did jury duty, I told them I lied because I said I won't vote to convict. I'm an anarchist because I thought that would get me off. And they said, too bad. And once
you're obligated to do jury duty.
Correct.
You're not obligated to be a press secretary for Dave Smith. So it is slightly different.
No, but I am obligated to be under the thumb of the federal government. Right. So,
of course.
Yeah. So in that case, I am obligated to participate in politics. My tax money is being taken from me. I'm being rendered defenseless in my own home. So yeah, I don't have a choice about participating in politics. That's the issue.
I think you do, though. I'm not sure on this one because you could just abstain from involvement. You could choose.
I cannot pay taxes?
No, you can pay your tax because your other choice is to face jail potentially.
Right. Yeah.
But you won't face jail by not engaging in politics.
Oh, right. But I mean, in this case, I'm getting. I would get paid, and it would be a lot of fun because I would be unleashing a season of poison on the two major political parties.
That's what I'm saying. Is this what it is? That you can go in and you can cause some problems. You can be.
I would make Donald Trump look like Julie Andrews. I would be because I have such contempt and hatred for the enemy class,
right.
That he would bring me on as like a social media person that I think it would be people would be taken aback and I would revel in it.
Okay,
I was born in the Soviet Union, so this is where my Ivan Drago would come out.
Rocky IV, man. That was the first Rocky I saw.
Was it?
Yeah, because of my age. I saw it before I saw the other ones.
Yeah.
And I had such fond memories of it. I watched it recently. I didn't realize how shit it is.
Of course, yeah, yes.
But the first two Rockies hold up.
Okay.
Yeah, I still think they're great films. Okay, my final question. Where do anarchists disagree with each other? Because I know libertarians disagree. Are there certain things that anarchists disagree on? Or
this entire book, the slogan I have is the black flag comes in many colors.
Yes.
So they agree. They don't even agree on the definition of anarchism.
Brilliant.
So the left anarchists, the European tradition, the original, the Bakunin people, the Proudhon people, they were against any semblance of hierarchy whatsoever.
Uh-huh.
The more recent, more American version, David Friedman, Murray Rothbard, is against the idea of the state, but they have no issue whatsoever with hierarchy per se. That's one issue. Another issue is what an anarchist society would look like. I mean, again, these essays are, cover the entire spectrum. So when you essentially are opposed to something, anarchism is a negation. What the positive alternative would look like, there's, infinite choice. It's like saying, what do fashion people agree on? Well, they agree that you should have clothes, but that really doesn't tell you very much.
Yeah.
So anarchism what they agree on is that people should interact peaceably without domination imposed upon them by the state. But what that would look like that's the beauty of having a free country.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm definitely going to go back to the book.
Good.
I'm going to work my way through it. I'm going to give myself time. I'm not going to be afraid to. I won't waste your time. If I have any really important questions, I will reach out to you.
Okay,
I've
absolutely.
appreciated your patience today. It's been great to see you. I'm probably 6 months to a year, going to ask you to come back because I'll be in maybe
My
a different
pleasure.
place.
This was a lot of fun. And bring your son.
No, I would love to bring my son. God, I would love that. I'd love to have my daughter here, but she's a bit younger, so it's different things we can do. But if I can do anything for you, if there are any people you want to talk to in the Bitcoin world, I still think there's some. I'd hope you would go a little bit closer on it. I think there's a couple of people I'd love for you to talk to, especially Alex Gladstein. I think you would have a great conversation with him. My friend Robert Breedlove, who was on Lex's show, he's worth talking to. He's interesting, but we'll see if you do.
Oh, isn't he like a hunk?
He is.
I don't like talking to the hunks.
Dude, this guy, he's like 6'5". He's ripped. He's smart as shit. He's the nicest guy. And we were in Miami together, and we were hanging out. And then we met up at a party later, and he walks in, carrying his daughter with his goddess wife. I mean, he's got everything. He's incredible.
Yeah, I don't like people like that.
Yeah, okay. Who are the ugly ones?
There's plenty. I know them. Don't worry.
Yeah, there's a lot of smart people. But I'd love to introduce you to Alex Gladstein. I think you and him would have a great conversation. But all right, tell people where to get the book.
Anarchisthandbook.com. Easy.
Okay, easy. You want people to get direct? They can buy with Bitcoin?
They can't.
They can't.
They can't buy with Bitcoin. Oh, they'll be able. Will they be able to buy the hardcover in Bitcoin?
Because I'm sure it's on your website. You can buy some of your books with Bitcoin.
When I did Dear Reader, which was my North Korean book, I had that you could buy signed copies with Bitcoin.
Right. Okay. Well, listen.
And that was in 2014. So I'm really.
You're early.
I was there before you.
Did you hodl it? Well, I was there in 2013, but I was spending it buying cocaine on the Silk Road.
I was at a party at some major personality's house. I'll tell you off air because I love messing with the audience. And it was me and like a Pulitzer winner and another prominent person, and I'm there for comic relief. And they go, who has ever bought anything with Bitcoin anyway? I'm like, well, I bought drugs. And they all look, because they're all in their 50s. I'm like, ha, 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 ha. And I had to backpedal, but it was pretty funny.
I lost like 3 Bitcoin when the Silk Road closed down. Oh, okay. And then Tim Draper bought them off the FBI, I think. And I said to him the other day, I'd like my 3 Bitcoin.
Yeah. Yes, please.
Yeah, you have 35,000. Yeah. 3 of those were mine. Come on.
Yeah.
I'll even give you what you paid for them now the price is where it is.
Yeah.
Appreciate your time. Appreciate your patience with my questions. And this is just part of my journey. So it's, really good for me to talk to you. So thank you so much.
You are welcome.